keep hope. We want to keep people in the vision despite the distraction. There's millions of us that believe in a world without gun violence, and that's what we're aiming for, a world free from gun violence.
Hello, and welcome to the Negative Space podcast presented by the Anthem Awards. I'm Patricia McLoughlin, Anthem Awards General Manager, and also your host. We have 7 cause areas that make up the Anthem Awards, and today we'll be diving into one of the most hotly discussed topics surrounding human and civil rights, gun control. There were 503 mass shootings in the United States in 2024, and this crazy number is actually down from the average of 650 mass shootings a year that we've seen for the past 4 years. Everytown for Gun Safety, which is an Anthem Award-winning organization, is the largest gun violence prevention organization in America. And Moms Demand Action, one of their advocacy arms, is the nation's largest grassroots volunteer network working to end gun violence. And they have more than 400 local groups across the country fighting for this. And today, I am thrilled to be speaking with the Executive Director of Moms Demand Action, Angela Ferrell-Zabala.
Hello, how are you, Patricia?
Doing well. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me here today.
Awesome. And welcome to the Negative Space. And to really kind of jump into things, you've been with Everytown for Gun Safety, I think, for a little over 5 years now. And
Yes.
I'm just so curious to hear what led you to this organization and how did you get involved with this work?
Yeah, great question. Well, I will tell you, I've always been involved in social justice in some way, shape, or form. I can think back to growing up, and my mother, we were, my parents weren't the richest people in the world, the working class folks. And I recall there was a day that we were driving down the highway, and I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, and we're driving down this paved highway. And there was a woman that we've seen before in our community, and she was an immigrant. I think she was Costa Rican. And she's walking, and it's like this suburb of Columbia. No one really was walking. Like this was like either driving or we did have public transportation, but it's a small little town. And so when you're walking, folks are like, "Are you okay?" That's the kind of suburb it was. And this woman had bags by her waist, I remember, and she's carrying them like she went shopping or something. And as she's walking on this hot, like summer day, I remember like the gravel like kicking up under her feet and like kind of dust because it was like an unpaved kind of road on the side of the highway. And my mom driving looked in the rearview mirror. Myself, the oldest of 3 girls, we're in the back seat, and caught my mom's eyes, and it was almost like she signaled to me, like this is something that we have to pay attention to. And she pulled over, and she let the woman in. She talked a little bit. Now, this woman barely spoke English. My mom spoke no Spanish, but somehow they communicated. And my mom, as she was getting the woman in, right before the woman came up into the car, she's like, "We have to look out for each other." And later that evening, she told me about, this woman probably wants the same as she does, make sure that her children are safe and that they're cared for. And we can't turn a blind eye when it looks like someone's in need. And so that was kind of my first entry into thinking about or being concerned with things bigger than just me. And my mother was a big influence in that. And I think from that point forward, I just was always hungry to make sure I was helping what I would consider the person, like underdog, some folks would call, but the person that needed. And I was always there to kind of be a friend or someone to lean on or do the work to make sure that we all can thrive. And so fast forward, here I am, Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action. I've done work in civil rights spaces. I've done work in reproductive health rights and justice spaces. I've done work in immigrant rights spaces, LGBTQI rights. So I always go to the easy issues, jump right into it. And so I came here because, gun violence is something that we see a lot of. I turned on the news and was tired. I live in the District of Columbia and was tired of seeing it. And I noticed there were survivors of gun violence that after losing so much stolen from them, they would get up, put one foot in front of the other, and decide that they're going to do something about this. They didn't just give up. They didn't just throw up their arms. And I felt that I needed to do more. So I joined this organization and never looked back, and really, really an honor to lead this incredible effort of volunteers across the country.
And I know with Moms Demand Action, it's one of the largest grassroots movements happening in the country overall, and specifically around gun violence. And it was started by a mom after what happened in Sandy Hook. And I would love to hear a little bit about the story of how this organization came to be, and also now how it also kind of connects to the larger Everytown for Gun Safety system.
Yeah, so as you said, it came after Sandy Hook, and my predecessor, Shannon Watts, is a founder of Moms Demand Action, and she got on Facebook and was tired of this. You tired. What can we do about this? And other mothers, came together and on that group and decided, we should do something about this. And I don't think Shannon understood what she was creating then, but she was fired up. She was pissed off, and she knew that seeing children being killed, shot and killed, just made no sense. There had to be something we could do about this. We wouldn't, of course, let this go on. We can't just say that
Mhm.
this is normal or this is something to expect. This is absolutely not normal, and it's something that we should not tolerate. And so I think, long story short, Moms Demand Action came together with Mayors Against Illegal Guns and formed Everytown for Gun Safety. And now we are in all 50 states plus the District of Columbia when it comes to our Moms Demand Action leaders. We also have Students Demand Action, which started after Parkland. I think our bread and butter was really looking at state focus. This is after Moms Demand Action started, and we were looking at the federal government to say, what are you going to do about this? We have these children were massacred in their classroom, kindergartners, first graders, right before the holidays. Surely, as a people, we're not going to tolerate this, and we are going to change something. And it failed, and people were disappointed. And we thought, like, what, Shannon and others thought that they would use their voices to get this thing passed, and then we'd be done with this. But we're not, because it was cowardly, and that didn't happen. And so we decided that we're just going to have to do it our damn selves. We're going to have to not wait for Superman to swoop in and save us, but we have to save ourselves. And who better than mothers and parents and grandmothers and community leaders and people that really care about what's happening with our children and what's happening across communities. And so that changed to not just advocating state by state where we can, advocating federally where we can, locally where we can. It also turned into, like, working when it comes to electoral politics, making sure that we're building the bench of leaders we need, the champions that are going to have the courage to stand up and do the right thing for citizens across this country. And so it has grown. It's a beautiful network of people across this country, and I have the distinct honor and privilege to be able to work with them. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say many of them are survivors themselves of gun violence in many forms. A little over 12 years, and here we are, and we're stronger than the NRA. Our numbers are bigger, and we have all stripes when it comes to our universe of leaders, so from gun owners to not, to parents to not, to students, Democrat, Republican, independent, it doesn't matter. People are fed up with this public health crisis, and they want to be able to see that there's something they can do about it. And Moms Demand Action is exactly, and Students Demand Action, where they can show up and actually take the steps we need to make sure that we're all safe.
And I'm curious your take too on where are we today in 2025? Obviously, last year we did see a bit of a drop in some of this gun related violence due to a lot of the Biden administration's strong measures that they kind of introduced. But where are we at this point in time?
Yeah, let's talk about 2025. So before I talk about what our strategy is, 2025 and beyond, I just want to just pan out and look at where we've come. This used to be the third rail issue of politics. You couldn't even discuss this. Republican,
Mhm.
Democrat, it didn't matter. The NRA was in, they were in the pockets of folks. And so we couldn't have this discussion. It would be shut down before it even started. And so now, if you fast forward to 2025, we've seen a lot happen. We have so many leaders that are not just seeing this as good policy, but good politics, and running and winning on this issue. In fact, uh, the last midterm election we had in Virginia, I believe, we had a lot of our volunteers running for office, and a lot of folks running on gun safety. And now 1 out of 5 of the House Democratic Caucus in Virginia are our own volunteers. So we have that progress. So people are running and winning on the issue. We saw in 2022 the first bipartisan federal legislation in nearly 30 years, in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. important. 15 Republicans joined that efforts, and that came after the Buffalo shooting in Uvalde. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, it was a wake up call for many and their constituents. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Nobody wants to see this. Nobody is okay with this being the leading cause of death for kids in this country and young people in this country. Nobody wants to see this anymore. And so, people stood up, had the courage to do the right thing and pass that incredible, package, and therefore opened up the door for so many other things. Looking at the Biden administration, as you said, looking at ghost guns, looking at funding organizations and groups on the ground that are doing gun violence intervention work. There's just so many levels, and that the last administration, Biden Harris, understood the crux of this problem. They understood how this is a public health crisis. They understood that this requires leadership and serious focus and a multitude of different strategies. And so we're pleased to work alongside them. And for 2025, we're going to continue. We're going to continue, and that we know I'd be can't sugarcoat it and say that we're going to have challenges, right? This movement
Yeah.
is going to face some challenges, especially when we think about federally. We're going to keep pushing. We are not going to stop. We're not going to give up. We're not going to let up. We know that the majority of Americans, regardless of party, regardless if you're a gun owner or not, veterans, faith leaders, students, folks want to see solutions to this crisis. This crisis doesn't have a party, doesn't have a zip code, it doesn't have any other identity. It can face any of us at any time, come to our doorsteps. And so we have to be proactive on this, not just reactive, and do everything in our power. So we're going to continue. We're going to work with leaders that are willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work. We're going to be pushing at every level from local to federal. We're going to continue to look at things like secure storage, like basic common sense
Yeah.
laws that can really save lives. We're going to make sure we're looking at programs that enhance or make sure there's resources for students and young people so that we can understand challenges and threats before they become a tragedy. We want to make sure background checks are something that are just common sense. So those are just a few things. And I will also say, looking at the gun industry that stands behind this, raking in $9 billion a year, blood on their hands. And in many ways, they can do simple things like innovate towards safer products instead of more
Mhm.
destructive products. So we're going to be looking at the gun industry as well. But those are just a few things. Again, we're going to keep going. Our volunteers, too many survivors, too many lives stolen, that we're not going to stop now. We've made progress before, and we're going to continue pushing forward.
That's so reassuring to hear. And I think overall, like we have seen generally cycles of pushback and progress. And obviously, every time one of these tragedies happens, it just kind of reignites that spirit, which is a terrible way that we have to be
That's
going about
right.
this. But as we kind of continue forward, how can we really, for the everyday person, be getting involved to help push back and to also ensure that some of the progress that we made isn't going to be backtracked within the next 2 to 4 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I often hear people say, well, I'm not a policy expert, or I don't know what I can do about this, or the problem seems so massive. What can I do to help? Everyone has a role to play because, again, this is a public health crisis, so it requires all of us to have all hands on deck to make sure we're moving this. It can be as simple as a conversation with your
Mhm.
neighbors or your friends about what you think about gun safety, what it means to you. It can be going to take your kids for a play date or a sleepover and asking a simple question: do you own a firearm? And if they do, is it securely stored? We have so many cases when we hear of unintentional shootings by children because they're able to access a firearm that they had no business having access to. And it's as simple as that, having it securely stored away so that that doesn't happen. We can show up when there's town halls in our communities. We can, even some of our volunteers, like I said, we're running for office. You can join a Moms Demand Action or Students Demand Action chapter. We have so many folks that are here to help you figure out, like, how do we get started? Going to your house of worship if you have that, and having these conversations. There's so many things that you can be doing. And we're here to help you figure that out because it can be overwhelming, but it's one step at a time, no action too small, to make sure that we are moving the needle on this issue, that we have actually policy that we know it's going to save lives. So it's just a matter of getting the education, getting the word out there, building the bench of leaders and supporting champions that are already here, that are doing the good work, and continuing just to educate the public because, again, there are solutions to this crisis, and we're going to continue moving forward to make sure that we can all thrive and not have to live in fear of gun violence every day.
And obviously, that fear is a reality for so many people. And I mean, especially for parents, we've seen attacks on schools from Sandy Hook, which I think really shook a lot of people, and
Yes.
then Parkland, and then Uvalde, and just these continuing heart wrenching situations. But what is it going to take to keep our schools safe from gun violence?
I think it takes the average citizen just speaking up and saying enough is enough. When you think about schools, I will first say that it is horrific. We hear so many things about school shootings, and it is scary for parents, even myself, when you're taking your kid to school to think about what that means, that you're entrusting these adults to be able to protect your child. And also think about the adults and the teachers that are there to teach. And now
Mhm.
they have to have this added layer of making sure, and they would do it in a heartbeat. I talked to so many teachers that said, these are my kids too when they're here, and I'm going to do whatever I can to protect them. Is that fair to the teachers? Is it fair to the kids? And so I understand that. But having the conversations with your school, what is your protocol? What does lockdown drills look like? Making sure that they're evidence based and not causing trauma. Like, what are the ways that you can just ask the questions, pull together even other parents and figure out, like, what is it that we need here? So I would say that. I would also say, even though that probably scares many parents like myself, that's not even the biggest when we think about gun violence. Kids just going out of their home and their neighborhoods to play, people going to the supermarket, people going to houses of worship, people going to a movie theater. So we
Mhm.
focus on schools because I think, I can only speak for myself, but the innocence of that, the innocence of taking your child to school, when you think about Sandy Hook, you think about kindergartners and first graders with just thinking about, they want what they're going to do at recess, or coloring and art and learning to read and their alphabet. And this is what they have to deal with. So I think that is very, it's like punches you in the gut, and it feels really disturbing to have to understand that you can't keep your kids safe because there are people without the courage to do the right thing and stand up with these life-saving policies that would keep our kids safe so they can learn and thrive. So I would also, I think this is a way to have your young people get involved, even like your high school age and college students. There's ways that they can actually raise their voice. They're leaders now. They're going to be voters. They understand, they grew up in the space of the lockdown generation, the mass shooting
Mhm.
generation, and they are sick and tired of it. So there are ways that they can use their creativity and whatever their talent is to help to carry along the message about what can be done here. And we see that with our Students Demand Action chapters across this country. So those are a couple ways that I think about. But also as parents, we can start talking like a school board. We can start thinking about voting. Elections have consequences and they matter. We want to make sure from school board all the way up to president. And people often look at the top. That's important. We also need to look at who's on school board, your sheriffs, your, all the county councils, everything that's going to um, really make a difference in your day-to-day life, your safety. Those are the places that you have to make sure that you're showing up, that you're asking the right questions, not just showing up to ask the questions, but showing up to vote and
Mhm.
voting for gun safety. So those are just a couple ways that I like to look at it, because we look at it from a policy, electoral, and legislative.
And I know you guys also, especially with Students Demand Action, recently had some success in Indiana passing some gun safety measures. So, as we look to some of the bright spots in this fight, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we're really, really excited. Indiana is one example of places that we're really focusing on things like secure storage, because
Mhm.
oftentimes when you're having these conversations about gun violence prevention, the first thing that you might hear is how it's taking something away. A Second Amendment argument may come up. And I like to push back on this because this is not about taking a right away from someone. It's about ensuring that this is well regulated, that we have folks that are responsible gun owners, and that
Mhm.
we make sure that we don't have guns falling into the wrong hands. Children, criminals, other folks that should not be accessing firearms. So secure storage is a really basic, I'd say just common sense way to start And it's usually a conversation starter I have, especially in some of the redder places. There was recent work in Indiana to pass gun safety measures with students demand action. We're really excited about that. And red flag laws as well, which means a red flag law is basically if someone poses a threat to themselves or to others, there is a process in place in which you can temporarily remove the firearm from that individual in crisis while they get the help that they need so that they don't do something that's going to harm themselves, like suicide, or harm others. In Indiana, doing this important work, saw a 7.5% reduction in firearm suicide rate in 10 years following the enactment of its extreme risk law. So there is work to be done, and it does work when we do it. We understand the states that actually are passing these incredible packages and these firearm safety laws, and they're seeing reductions across the board. And we want to continue that trend. There's so much work to be done, but we want to make sure that everyone is trending down when it comes to gun violence. And we have so many different ways that we can tackle that.
As you were saying, there really is proof in the pudding here when we do see these laws continuously showing decreases in these numbers of deaths and suicides. And it really is, it's working.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I think something that people always kind of scratch their heads about with this is why is it controversial and why is the safety of kids in schools and just generally the safety of all of us something that is requiring such a fight? And what are we really up against as we kind of continue this and try to change the narrative?
Yeah, when you think about this, we're thinking about an industry, okay? And we're thinking about this is like really touching on the cultural aspect of this issue. This is when we think about guns in this country, it has a deep history, and it's part of our culture. And we're more and more seeing this kind of extremism, this gun extremist culture, kind of embedded. And I think one of the things that we understand is this is an industry problem. We need to, if we're going to solve this crisis, yes, it's about elections. Yes, it's about law and policy. But if we don't have everyone hands on deck, including gun manufacturers and the gun industry itself, part of this problem, like solving this problem, then we won't be able to fully solve it in the way we need to. And I think when we think about other industries, let's think about cars, safeties like seatbelts. Let's think about opioids and pill bottles. Those fights were long fights, but they also required people to lawsuits and they required people to keep showing up and keep pushing. So the industry knew that there was a cost to their negligence, costing lives, costing people's time. And so this is exactly what we're taking those kind of leads from other movements and industries where we've seen this happen before. And I think that's why it's so important to think about what it looks like to work with, if they will work with us, with the gun industry, but also pushing against them. Now, many people may not be aware of this, but there is the industry actually is immune to lawsuits and such at this point. And this is because of something called PLACA. And PLACA is the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. And nearly a decade ago, the gun lobby convinced Congress to grant them special legal protection. And because of this, the firearms industry can largely dodge responsibility for death and destruction with their products. Think about any like cribs, even. I remember when I'm a mother of four, and so I had many cribs. And I just remember with anything with infants and car seats and you had to be held accountable. Consumer protections and other things where you cannot have companies making faulty products or having products that harm or cause harm and not be held accountable. Unfortunately, we're in a place where this is exactly what is happening when it comes to the gun industry now. So that is a big part in it that we cannot, it's been impenetrable, this shield, but we are working at that to make sure that we are getting in where we can to expose this. Because again, this is something, if the industry was working alongside us to help to make their products innovate towards safety, things like being able to unlock the gun with a fingerprint or biometrics or things like that. If we could work towards that instead of making more destructive weapons or avoiding any kind of accountability for this, I think that's the biggest thing. So when you think about the money behind it, that's a big reason because it does not line up with the politics of when it comes to where people stand on this. People, the large majorities, regardless of party, regardless of where you live, regardless of you're a gun owner or not, believe that we should have common sense measures when it comes to guns in this country to make sure we're keeping our communities safe.
Interesting. And so, with this podcast, The Negative Space, one of our big kind of things with this is trying to uncover some of the unseen challenges that people face in this work. So, I'm curious for Moms Demand Action, what are some of the lesser known challenges or aspects of this work that people might not be aware of that you guys are up against?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we look at here. I mean, we know that there's lots of different barriers that we face, and it does not stop us. I think one challenge that I think about often um, is the fact that this movement that we have that has grown and getting stronger is getting stronger because this crisis is so immense. And that is something that I sit with every single day when I get to travel across states and meet different folks, many of them survivors themselves. It reignites the reason that I do this, but it also reminds me in those tragic moments or when I'm hearing a story of a survivor, like I think about this is not where we should be. I think the challenge is that we are talking in bumper stickers. And when I say we, I'm just saying writ large, like you have this back and forth conversation on bumper stickers. Like I have a right to own, to bear arms or taking away my right versus, what that's a dead end conversation. I like to
Mhm.
start from this is a leading cause of death for kids, teens, and young adults in this country. And surely we can agree that that is not okay. And if we start from there, we can make it somewhere. We can do something about this. I don't want to start from in our corners because that is it's a lose-lose situation. It is not true, first of all. And it also is just an unfair because it cuts off the conversation and cuts off any ability, any options to do something together to actually solve this crisis. So I think that is a challenge, but it also is, frankly, because of the scope of this problem, more and more people are seeing that this is a problem and they want they want some solutions to this. So I think that is something that keeps me up at night. I think one thing I would say is a positive or a gem, many, many things. Again, many people that I get to talk to across the board, different identities, different political spectrums, feel like there is something that we need to do here. And I remember I believe I was in Tennessee. There was a gentleman, I was at a rally, I was speaking. I think I was helping one of our candidates and one of the candidates running for office. I was there as a surrogate. It was a gentleman that approached me afterwards, and he looked the part of someone that lives in where he lived, and is like maybe a gun owner, and just he kind of had this look on his face, like, and his arms crossed, like what everything that we were saying or I was saying was just like burning his ears. But he came up to me, which I really appreciated that because he came up to me to have a conversation. He didn't come up to have a back and forth or yell. He came up
Mhm.
and he said, "I don't understand. I just don't agree because I'm a veteran and I have firearms and it's my right." And I listened to him and I said, "You're right. You do have a right. And I'm sure you're a responsible gun owner, but there are some things in place that we need to make sure that we're looking at to make sure that we're keeping all folks safe so that you also can own your firearm responsibly and my children can be safe going to school and this person in a domestic violence situation doesn't have to fear for their life and the list goes on." We spoke for some time because he kept going back to mental health, which, we do want to make sure that we have resources for mental health, but we can't scapegoat mental health here because we
Mhm.
know that most of the time, people that are suffering from a mental crisis or mental health issues are more likely to be victimized and to be people that are perpetrators. We also know that other countries have the same levels of mental health crises that we do, if that's what we're going to call it, but they don't have the same issue when it comes to guns. So we talked about that a little bit at the end of our conversation, and this was just a back and forth regular curiosity, being curious, which I always say is a choice. This gentleman ended up saying, "You know what? There should be something where we're doing some kind of like we run someone through a system or do some kind of check before someone has a firearm." he basically talked about and convinced me that we need background checks. And this is something that, if we just say background checks, folks go to their bumper sticker or go to their corners and say, no, this is taking away a right. But when you actually have that conversation, you'll understand that most people are where we are. It's just
Yeah.
we've been talking up here and we don't hear each other. We're in spaces where you can actually really curate your group of people around you to be an echo chamber. But I think those are the most valuable conversations to have sometimes because we end up kind of breaking through and planting seeds. And I also learn from it. I understand what is the fear behind this. Why maybe you're not, coming with me to the Capitol because this is what you're fearing, like with the Capitol to advocate because you're fearing X, Y, and Z. So I think those are important conversations to have, but that is a gem. I think that's a beautiful thing to see is that people actually want to see something different. And our volunteers are stepping up every single day, not only to fight on behalf of everyone in this country to make sure it's safer when it comes to gun violence, but some of them are stepping up and actually not just advocating for good policy, but they're starting to write it when they run for office and they win on this issue. And they show up in state houses across this country doing the important and good work that we need to be done.
Yeah. And it really is something where so often people want to look at things as a black or white issue. It's a right issue or it's a left issue. But there's so much nuance to all of this, and there's so much common ground. And I think as soon as everyone can take those blinders off and start being able to, again, get back to common ground, get back to
That's right.
seeing each other and seeing people's perspectives and just having those conversations, it's so important for this topic and for so many other things that we're seeing happen across the
I
country.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I will say it again 100 times. Curiosity is a choice. You have to go into these conversations with curiosity because even myself, I have to say, be curious because
Mhm.
I know, like when I hear some things, sometimes when people say, um, I heard someone say, well, we should just lock people up in mental institutions. And my first internally it's like that's frustrating to hear and it doesn't solve a problem and it sounds like it's just some kind of a talking point that's been and it harms people. It does harm when you put words are more than just words. When you say things like that, it
Mhm.
actually causes harm to other people. But when I stop myself and say I want to be curious about why they would say that and figure it out, and you can usually start to unravel. Now not everyone has time to have a long conversation to unravel everyone's thoughts, or at least call them into question, or at least have them explain them to you. That's all we're asking. It's not about a
Mhm.
debate, and you will be surprised that there's so much more that we agree on than we don't.
Yeah, definitely. And I think jumping back into as we think about things, especially more at a community level, and as we're creating these systems, how can we fight to create a system that also addresses some of the socioeconomic issues that have led to gun violence and have created some of these issues in the first place?
Yeah, I think this is where it's really important to work in partnership. It's one of the things I always talk about that I really actually enjoy is thinking about when I think about every time for gun safety, Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, we are on the front lines of gun violence prevention. But there are other organizations that might be on the front lines of food insecurity, or might be on the front lines of mental health care, or might be on the front lines of just healthcare generally, or
Mhm.
crime, or whatever that may be. And I think it's so important to bring all those pieces together because when you think about an individual's life, or community, of the life of a community, all these factors weigh in. We know that we need a holistic approach to ending gun violence. When we think about people not having their basic needs met, oftentimes communities that are often marginalized over and over again on every issue you can imagine, and that's Black and Brown communities. We think about LGBTQI communities, sometimes women. This is where we really need to think about what is it that they need? What are their basic needs? How are they being met? Because we find that we can breed these cycles when we don't have people getting what they need, or they're feeling like they're shut out from anything, that people don't invest or care about their communities. It makes it feel like, if you can imagine, your day to day gets shrinks, and it's really comes down to survival. And then when you're in that survival mode, you're not thinking beyond that. And we can see a lot of this stuff happening. We also think about healing community. It's collective trauma that goes down to your children, and you're raised in these communities and see that this is all you have to look to. So I think we have to really partner with folks. We have to understand the intersections of all these different movements and these issues that meet people, because they don't live in a vacuum or single issue lives. We have to really work on removing the barriers that are put up due to institutional racism. It's why we see, again, so many Black communities stuck in cycles of violence, and figure out how we're breaking those cycles. And we need to reinvest in community violence intervention, make sure that that is something, because they're on the front lines of this and they understand what their communities need. So there's so many ways we can do this, but I think partnering is really important, and also understanding what communities need. They often know, so not prescribing. What do you need? How can we show up as partners to make sure that those things are happening?
Yeah. And I think even as we kind of look ahead and to the coming months, to the coming years, what can each of us be doing? And also, along with that, if someone's interested in becoming involved with Moms Demand Action or Students Demand Action, how do they actually go about doing that?
Yeah, so I would just say it's hard to turn on the news and hear this every day. And then coupled with, kind of the world that we're in right now, where you just don't understand up from down sometimes. Like this is, I think when we think about this new administration, it's just every day is something new that people are trying to grapple with and understand how it impacts their lives. Remember, our focus is making sure that our kids are safe. And this is not the leading cause of death for our kids and our families across this country. Making sure our communities can not just survive, but they can thrive. Making sure that we're connecting together and not having these gaps between us as if we're enemies, but we're in community together is really important. I think just remember that there are teams of people, there are people across, like whether they're wearing a red shirt, Moms Man Action red shirt, or a cream Students Man Action shirt, they are showing up every single day. And some of them don't even realize that they're advocates or that they're heroes and sheroes within their communities. I think having a conversation, don't be afraid to do that. Like educating yourselves and others about what is possible, what we can do about this public health crisis is really important. And joining us, we are happy to receive you. I think oftentimes, and I come out of organizing, and I know the first time I showed up to a meeting, I was overwhelmed because I showed up because somebody told me, well, a friend of mine said, you should just come. But before that, I felt like there's nothing I can contribute. I'm not a policy expert or a lawyer, and I'm going to have to get in these conversations and battles with people, and I don't know how to defend myself. I had all this swirling in my head, but all you have to do is take that first step, show up. There's a community around you that will help you and figure out what is it that you have to offer that you can help to kind of give to us, to give to this movement, so that we can actually make all of our communities safe together. So I think we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep moving, and it's hard because we're going to see some hard times, but we're also going to see lots of victory because we're going to keep pushing through. And I'm looking forward to working alongside anybody that's willing to do what is right and has the courage to do what's right to keep our families and communities safe. You can certainly text READY to 64433, and you'll be plugged in to your local Moms Demand Action chapter. And you can text student to 64433 if you're interested in Students Demand Action. But we're here, and we have website everytown.org that you can look at, everytownforgunsafety.org. You can look at, and we have lots of resources. So we are here. We'll be here if you need anything, but we're going to keep fighting.
Awesome. And I know I'm so grateful for the work that you guys do, and so many of our listeners and members of the Anthem community are as well. Also, with the Anthem Awards, to celebrate all of our winners, we ask people to always do a one sentence call to action speech. So, as we wrap up, what is one reminder or vision that you want to leave the audience with today?
I just want to say, keep hope. We want to keep people on the vision despite the distraction. There's millions of us that believe in a world without gun violence, and that's what we're aiming for, a world free from gun violence. So just, I say, link up with us, join us, but we're going to keep moving that vision forward because it is possible. And I appreciate all of you listening today and look forward to working with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angela. This was really such an amazing conversation. And I'm so excited to keep following your work and see what you guys have happening next.
Thank you so much, Patricia. What an honor to be here.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow, rate, like, and subscribe wherever you are watching or listening. The 5th Annual Anthem Awards will be opening for entries on Tuesday, April 8th. If your work or passion is having an impact, we would love to see it entered this year. For more information about the Anthem Awards, you can visit us online at anthemawards.com and at Anthem Awards on social. Thank you to our production and editorial team, including Sugebo, Jordana, Jarrett, and Kate Michigan. Thank you again for listening. I'm Patricia McLoughlin, and this was The Negative Space.